They just keep outplaying each other every street in that hand. That was great.
Hello. In today's video we're going to look at a few big hands played in the very early stages of the first event of the Triton Poker Series in Jeju. Let's jump into the action. First hand starts with a raise from early position with Queen Jack suited from Gitis/Żołnierz. We can see even the offsuit variance raises here sometimes, and for a suited part of range this isn't even close, and Queen 9 suited is the worst one he should have here. Artem Wierzenkov has Ace-King suited and decided to 3-bet. This is also fine, and this is one of the 3 hands that he should 3-bet with 100% frequency. Action went back to the Lithuanian player and he decided to 4-bet his hand. When we look at solver ranges, we see that this specific hand can take all 3 possible actions, but it's mostly calling, then folding and 4-betting only with a very low frequency. Solver prefers to 4-bet suited kings because they will dominate a bigger part of the calling range, and also they block hands like Ace-King or kings that are never folding. The Russian player decided to just call his Ace-King suited. This is the first play that solver doesn't approve of. It wants to go all in with it every time, but if we look closer we can see that EV difference between calling and jamming is very marginal, so it's not like he's throwing money away here. Also, if we look at Ace-King off, solver mixes it between calls and jams. From a GTO perspective this might be better, but from a human point of view I kinda like what Artem is doing. If I want to have some combos of Ace-King in calling range and rest as jams, I would also rather have suited ones as a call, because it's a bit easier to navigate with them post-flop. This is a very interesting flop, because in a 4-bet pot with very tight ranges, neither player should have any sets here. Early position player can have more nuts, because Ace-4 suited is one of prime candidates to 4-bet bluff, and also he has more strong overpairs, so he can actually c-bet here with very high frequency, with more than 3/4 of hands. What is also very interesting here, that the solver almost never uses middling sizings here, and either goes for small bet or just goes all in for big overbet as the most used sizing in this situation. The only hands that will fold to small c-bet on this board are some suited broadways, so c-betting with Queen Jack suited that blocks these folds is a mistake here. The Russian player calls with his Ace-King. We can see that against this small bet the solver is almost never raising nor folding and is calling with almost 90% of range to see the turn in position. The turn is 8 of spades. Git is checked and gave up at this point. This card is a total brick and doesn't interact at all with ranges of both players. We can see that the solver isn't happy to barrel that much and is checking around half of hands, and these occasional bluffs with King 9 suited or King Jack of hearts are giving up too, so well played. There is something to learn from this. After misplaying on previous street, even in a big pot, we're not committed to going for it every time. It's usually a smart thing to cut the losses instead of being stubborn and making even bigger mistake. Artem checks back and we can see that Ace-King can take all the actions on the turn, but checking it back is perfectly fine, especially if he doesn't have Ace of clubs. 9 of diamonds on the river is another card that doesn't change much. Gitis doesn't have a good hand to bluff and he checks again, and Artem also doesn't need to bet and he checks back, so after a lot of fireworks at the start of the hand it ended very calmly. Overall, I would say it was well played by both players. Next very interesting hand was brewing at the same time on the other feature table, so we don't have video from action up until the river, but there is available hand history, so let's quickly go over it. Hand started with an open from the button with 10-7 suited and a call from big blind with Jack 9 suited. Both plays are fine, but we can see that on 100 big blinds, Jack 9 suited actually prefers to 3-bet more often than call. On the flop, Remy c-bet with a very big sizing, slightly overbetting the pot. This board is pretty good for big blind and the button has only small equity advantage, so it's not a board to c-bet it with the whole range. We don't see this play very often in tournaments, but when we look at GTO ranges on this board, solver uses all 4 sizings, and overbet is the most common one. 10-7 of clubs with an overcard and backdoor is a nice hand to do it. Big blind should fold more than half of his range right away, but all pairs should continue, and Jack 9 suited is calling here every time. 5 of clubs paired the turn and Bogdanov checked. According to solver, this is fine with some small frequency, but overall this card is perfect for his range and he should mostly bet, taking the initiative with more than 80% of hands. It's because he can have all the trips and button shouldn't overbet many of them on the flop, so now big blind has both equity and nut advantage. Remy checked his hand and this is okay. He should have a very polarized range here, and betting big and getting raised would be a disaster for his hand, so realizing his equity was a smart decision here. But there is something to keep in mind. After checking back, his range becomes capped, because when we look at all the strong hands with still pretty high SPR, he should continue with all of the nutted hands. All full houses and trips should bet on this turn, and also if we look at nut flush draws, they also want to bet. Queen of clubs brings backdoor flush for both players, and Bogdanov led for block bet sizing. We can see that this specific hand takes this action almost 100% of the time. Very nice play here. Remy raised, and this is an easy play for value with his 10 high flush. Now I feel like most players would just call, but Julian took his time to rethink about what happened before in this hand. Remy capped himself on the turn, so only hands he should be afraid of are some fraction of combos of pocket queens, because this hand also should barrel the turn most of the time, and some occasional king-high flushes. But they're also heavily blocked by his hand, and there is much more lower flushes that would raise this block bet for value. He went all in, and Solver loves that play. Remy was in a world of pain and finally called, and also here the solver likes that call and isn't folding any flushes. Pot is so big that calling here is GTO approved. This was a very impressive hand and a masterclass of river play by Bulgarian player. Next hand I have for you also includes crazy fireworks on the river, but let's start from the beginning. Joey Weissman raised from middle position with ace-jack off, and this is of course standard open. Shimizu Nozomu called queen 8 off from big blind, and this hand is on the edge. Solver prefers to fold it, but is calling with it some portion of the time. When playing deep out of position, offsuit hands that rarely make very strong hands are very hard to play, and even though they have not so bad raw equity, they're often dominated and almost never make the nuts. Weissman checked back on the flop. This is a small mistake. He got right that he shouldn't bet his whole range here. On this board he has pretty big equity advantage because he has a lot of strong hands like ace-king or aces that big blinds should never have. But on the other hand, he lacks nut advantage because apart from two combos of ace-4 suited, he doesn't have any other trips. When we look closer at the different combos of ace-jack off, we can clearly see a pattern. Those that block two backdoor flush draws want to always bet because they have increased fold equity, and those that block only one want to check back sometimes. After the turn, Shimizu checked and Weissman played a delayed c-bet. This is a fine play. Ace-jack with either ace or jack of diamonds should always bet, and combos without it are checking back. Nozomu check raised, and this is a crazy play, and also a very bad one. He has literally the worst possible hand he can have here and has no equity when called. He should be folding more than half of his range, and this is a prime candidate to do it. He can check raise here, but there is enough bluffs. He has a lot of flush draws and straight draws, and when he raises here everything, then he is over bluffing by a lot. Joey called the raise, and this isn't part of GTO. He just has so many stronger hands to do it. He has a lot of kings, lot of pairs, and also strong flush draws that can continue here. And he has air just a small portion of the time. If he is calling here with ace-jack off, then what is he even folding? On the other hand, if he knows that Nozomu can go nuts in this spot with hands like queen 8 off, then calling here might be an okay adjustment. But if he expects too much check raises, then just checking back this hand on the turn might be a better play. 10 of diamonds completed the board, and Shimizu bet for half of the pot. This is most used sizing, but hand selection for that is pretty bad, but this is something I was talking about in the last hand. He made a bad play on the turn, and now he makes an even bigger mistake on the river. He has the worst hand he can have that never wins on showdown, but it doesn't make it a mandatory bluff. He should at least block some flushes to try this play. We've already drifted far out of GTO realm, but his hand is also close to the bottom of Joey's range. He should be so strong on this river that it is very easy to find a lot of better calls and also a lot of better bluffs, even when I locked big blind's range to have a lot of crap in this scenario. He jammed his hand, and this is what I call street poker. Also, his sizing isn't part of GTO. Solver never goes all in on this river. This hand was as far from theory as it could get, and this was just dick measuring contest, and usually in those spots the player that has the last word wins. I hope you liked this video. In the next few hand breakdowns expect a lot more action from the record-breaking Triton Poker Series in Jeju, because today we just scratched the surface and there are a lot of more great hands to cover. If you don't want to miss it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and see you next time. Bye!